All right, let's move on to damn line number 2. Sort of related, sort of not. I didn't want to talk about this because it's more specific. Damn line number 2 is, I'll pull that up, Brian. Rural whites are the epitome of patriotism, or the patriotic paradox of rural America. This is what you say in the book. The attitude of too many rural whites may be best described as, I love my country, but not our country. I always thought of it as, I love America, but I don't love Americans. So same sort of zip code. Because rural whites often brag about how much they love the United States, we call this phenomenon the patriotic paradox of rural America. Given the position they hold, rural whites ought to be the role model for democratic citizenship. They ought to have the highest voter turnout, the best run elections, the most participatory local government, and the most passionate commitment to binding legal ideals, American ideals. Instead, it's the opposite. Dozens of surveys and academic studies confirm that disproportionately high share of rural whites harbor unusually xenophobic, conspiracist, anti-democratic, and even dangerous attitudes. So where does this idea come from? Because is it that they're the first to say love it or leave it? Because honestly, it doesn't seem like they even love it that much. Why do we believe this to be true?
I mean, a lot of this is us versus them, right? I mean, patriotism is fine, and it's been fun to watch the Harris Walz campaign reclaim patriotism and shouting USA at the convention, this summer. I think that was really remarkable. But patriotism's ugly, step cousin is nationalism, and its really terroristic, ugly second cousin is jingoism, right? Patriotism gets ugly when you think, wow, my country's better than all the other countries. And then jingoism, my country's so good that we're allowed to use force to do whatever we want around the world. And I think nationalism is a very dangerous trend that's happening, an emergent trend, and a lot of people are writing about it. And when you overlay that with the whiteness and the religious aspect, and you have white Christian nationalism, the people start to confuse their love for their country with their demand that the country look, think, act, pray, and love just like them and only like them. And that's the real danger. And as we show in the book, despite breaking their arms to pat themselves on the back about how much they love America and some Lee Greenwood song, and to their credit, rural Americans do send more people into the military per capita, give them credit for their service to the country. When we look at their commitment to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they're much more likely to say the president should act with unchecked power. Rural white people are much more likely to say January 6th was okay and to justify those actions. They actually don't express more patriotic attitudes. In fact, they express less patriotic commitments to norms and traditions, the Constitution, our rule of law, our inclusive democracy with civil rights and civil liberties for all. And so that's the paradox, is that they talk a good game on patriotism, but they don't walk the walk.
I agree with you about the Harris Walz campaign too, about the American thing, because if you see a dude in an American flag t-shirt, say, you automatically assume he's Republican. Like half of us, like the flag doesn't represent. The whole thing too with Kaepernick kneeling down, he's like, oh, he's insulting the soldiers. First of all, it had nothing to do with the soldiers, but it's just the American flag means very specific things, but only for about half the country, which is conceptually bizarre. I was wondering, and I want to get your opinion on this, does it have to do with this idea of like unconditional love? Because what you find is, I think the left tends to want the United States and what we represent to evolve and change. Whereas the right is like, oh, it's classically this thing. And if you want it to change, you hate it and you should leave it. Do you think that plays into any part of it?
It certainly does. And I think it's like I started this answer is us versus them. So if you believe in the Constitution, its principles and traditions and history, it shouldn't matter what the face of the person who supports that Constitution is and swears on the oath to defend it. And I'll tell you what, I'd bet my entire salary, I'd bet my entire 403B retirement that Donald Trump couldn't pass the citizenship exam, but new citizens have to pass that exam often in a second language. You think Donald Trump could pass the citizenship exam in English without prepping or cheating? He couldn't certainly pass it in French, right? He can barely speak English above a third grade level. I bet he doesn't know the difference between Madison and Monroe, right? So, it should matter what you believe, not who you are and what you look like and whom you pray to and whom you love and where you live. And I think some people in America, and it's not just rural Americans or rural white Americans, a lot of suburban whites, a lot of non-whites too, have forgotten this. They believe that patriotism is for me, but not for thee. And that's a problem.
It is a problem. I find myself to be very patriotic despite being very liberal.